This is James Davenport. I am the Associate Dean of Social Sciences at Rose State College and the organizer of this Free to Choose School Choice Options, Obstacles, and Opportunities in Oklahoma Conference. And we have with us today Brent Bushey from the Oklahoma Public School Resource Center. He serves as the executive director at the OPSRC. And helps establish and is responsible for building relationships with school leaders while also focusing on recruiting and hiring the staff of his organization. The position is a return to his career roots as he began his career as a teacher in New Orleans public schools on behalf of Teach for America, and also served as a Teach for America national recruitment director. Prior to joining OPSRC, Brent served as a program manager with the federal government. He holds a master's in public administration from George Washington University and a BA in political theory and constitutional democracy from Michigan State University. Brent, we are pleased to have you here, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us about the public school options that families have here in Oklahoma.
Definitely. Thank you, Dr. Davenport. I appreciate the opportunity to talk today.
Let's start with, I guess, maybe give us an overview, if you will, of we know,
Sure.
We have traditional public schools, we have some charter schools, we have virtual schools. Can you walk us through what some of the differences in these are? What maybe some of the considerations when trying to choose the right one for someone's child? We just start there, if that'll work.
Yeah, well, one, I really appreciate the chance to talk, right? Because a lot of times when you hear the word school choice, or a lot of times when it's thought of in the media, they think, okay, so people jump right to vouchers or ESAs, private schools, right? And look, I think a lot of folks support school choice, and that's great. I think we also, though, do a disservice if we don't think about the existing choices that families have within our various public school systems.
Sure.
So, the fact that you thought about that, I think is really key. And so I'll kind of give an overview of sort of the four different, it's really three with a fourth one that's a little bit different of the different public school options. And
Okay.
I'll give a quick overview, and then I can go a little bit deeper, and, feel free, we can turn this into a conversation or
Sure.
ask less questions. So the four choices that I see it as, one is your district of residence, your traditional school district where people live. There are other traditional districts, right? So your neighboring districts or surrounding districts. There's charter schools. And then the fourth that doesn't really fit, but it's definitely something we should talk about, is career tech.
Okay. All right.
So let's start off with the district of residence. That's kind of the one I think most people are probably most familiar with. It's
Sure.
where you live. If you've got a child, they get assigned to a school. So that's great for many people, including myself. That works out for our family, right? My two girls, we reside in Edmond Public Schools. My two girls are I've the joyful parent of two middle school kids. He said,
my goodness.
I love my kids. Every once in a while, liking them is difficult in middle school. They are wonderful. And we live a mile from the middle school, and that works great for us. But there's a few things, so that's the standard. If you get assigned and things are good, great. That's a good option. There's a few things, though, that I wanted to highlight about some choices that maybe people don't think about in the traditional district.
Okay.
So first of all is intra-district choice.
Okay.
Now, if you're in a small rural district, this isn't an option, right? But, in a lot of districts, you have multiple elementary options, multiple middle school, multiple high school. And each district has its own policy on how they handle that. But as families are considering options, perhaps their local school, for whatever reason, is not a good fit. There is that option to consider intra-district. And again, that's a policy that each district gets to set, but it's definitely something folks should consider. And then a piece of choice that's sort of within a school, and probably more for your secondary kids, at least middle, if not high school, is something that can come, I've heard referred to as course choice.
Okay.
So, in Oklahoma, we have some laws that require districts to offer electronic options.
Okay.
And, as families consider, especially in some of our schools where, due to staffing concerns or, for whatever reason, um, there's a limited number of courses available. Families might consider, though, talking to the district about what are the electronic options available today. We know virtual learning is not for everyone. We painfully learned that lesson during COVID. But there are definitely a lot of options out there that where you can get a teacher of record from afar. A lot of the rural districts that the Resource Center works with that's how they offer foreign languages because we may not have enough kids for a class, or they'll handle it for like an AP course or something where they're never really going to have a ton of options. And so that's something that families should really try and explore when they're considering their different options. I'll pause there. Any questions on that one, or
but is that also set at the district level, or as far as or is that even at the school level is what they might be able to offer? Who decides what options we're going to be able to provide?
Yeah, I think school and or district can, they'll determine. It's not like families can come in and demand, okay, this is the one course that I want, but there is a requirement at the state level that computer-based courses are offered, and so every district will have an option available to families.
I want to go back to your discussion of kind of the intra-school choice.
Yeah,
I think that's an option a lot of people don't hear about. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems that's not an option that a lot of people talk about when they talk about school choice. Is my child is in this middle school for whatever reason that doesn't seem to be meeting our needs. They're not happy, or we're not pleased, or maybe the school's not pleased with it, whatever, right?
Sure.
And there's another middle school over here. It's in the same district. It's still a public school. And we can, and I'm sure there's a process, and maybe you'll kind of walk us through that a little bit later, but a process if I want to transfer them. But I would think that would be easier intra-district. Maybe I'm wrong, but intra-district, I think that would be easier than one that's inter-district, right? Where we're going from one district to another. But that would seem to be easier to do on the face of it.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I can just share some personal experiences. So again, there is no requirement for a district to offer intra-district.
Okay.
The district policy. So each district will be different. And I think that's where it's incumbent on the families to build that relationship and understand what the district policy is. But within Edmond, I mentioned I have two girls. One of my oldest daughter has Down syndrome. So I'm very active in the Down syndrome community. And we know with special needs, some kids just don't fit with some teachers, right? Sure. And there's a limited number of special education teachers statewide. There's definitely limited numbers within each school. I'm familiar with some families where it just hasn't worked, where the kid, not blaming anybody, but it just isn't a fit. And I know that in those cases, the families have worked with the district to then find a new placement. Logistics get complicated. So how do you handle transportation? Sure. In my experience, typically the families then are responsible for the transportation. And generally speaking, you're willing to figure that out as a parent if that helps you out. At least in my experience. And I guess the district can also, that's where folks we need to find a way to work together and get creative solutions. Right. There's one other piece I wanted to to highlight on that is, the other thing that is difficult just to acknowledge is, intra-district transfer, we couldn't allow, if it was within a specific district, if there's the one school that everyone wants to get into, the quote unquote good school, obviously there's going to be space limitations. So it's not that Katie bar the door, everyone will be able to access. But, generally speaking, the folks that I've run into, when you go to a school, when you go humbly and you explain your situation, a lot of times, I don't think most folks get into education to feel like, we're going to hold kids hostage and captive. And so finding some of those solutions, I think can be done at the district level by having some of those difficult conversations. Yeah,
very good. Very good. Well, let's talk about what are some of the considerations if I'm looking at maybe moving my child from my local school and I want to consider a public charter school or maybe a public virtual school, what are some of the important considerations parents should take into account when making that choice?
Sure. So we've talked about intra-district. We'll come back to inter-district. I don't want to forget that because I think that's a particularly exciting option. So in the charter world, you're right to highlight, we have two different options within charter schools. You've got virtual charter schools that operate statewide, and then you have brick and mortar charter schools.
Right.
Let's tackle the virtual charter school piece first. I believe there's 7 virtual charter schools today in Oklahoma, and my understanding is an 8th has been approved for the coming school year, so in fall of 23. All of those are governed by a sponsor called the Statewide Virtual Charter School Board.
Okay.
Those schools apply, get approved, and then they accept students.
Okay.
Any student in the state is eligible to enroll in any of those schools. Some of the characteristics on most of the virtual schools offer what is typically referred to as sort of 100% virtual option, right? Where the parent is responsible for the physical learning environment, which is a fancy way of saying you got to have them at home or somewhere else. And then the students will take their coursework primarily online. So you'll log in. A lot of times the courses are asynchronous, which is a fancy way of saying there's no teacher available. So you'll and then the teacher you reach out to with questions if you're struggling with pieces. And the generally speaking, you'll get assigned to a teacher or a group of teachers, and then there are some class periods where you can log in, kind of like office hours, like in college, where you can sit in, you can ask questions, and in those time periods, teachers will teach lessons, especially when they know that students are struggling with certain aspects.
Sure.
But by and large, the virtual education is student and or parent driven, right? In terms of managing the schedule. During COVID, we made the decision to enroll our girls into a fully virtual option, and ended up working out great for us. We had grandparents that were stuck in homes and learned how to use Zoom, and it didn't hurt that 2 grandmas were rather competitive about supporting thank God it's all over, because I am an extrovert and was sick of being inside. But we made the best of a difficult situation, and I think that's the key piece. Is if you're going to choose that virtual option, by and large, the family's going to need to be really engaged, and that's I think for anything, we know that the more a parent is engaged, the better for the kid.
Sure.
But particularly in a virtual environment, that's a pretty key aspect. And the things to factor are, how am I going to make sure my kid's safe, right? Like, there are times you got to run out and go into the grocery store or take a work meeting or do things. And so how do you handle that when you're not available? Obviously, as kids get older, that's less of a concern, but with younger kids, it can be difficult. And looking at the different options, there's a STEM focused option that Dove Charter Schools operates. Oh, they'll get mad at me if I can't remember the name. Oklahoma Educational Information, OEIT. Let's see if I can remember it. That's theirs. There's Oklahoma Virtual Charter Academy. They partner with Stride for their curriculum, as does Insight, and they have a particular focus on alternative education at Insight. We have eSchool. We have Connections Academy. Oh gosh, I apologize for the schools. And the largest is actually Epic. So the one of the piece that distinguishes Epic from the rest of the schools, and if I'm wrong, please don't take me as the sole authority on this, but I am quite familiar with Epic's option, where they offer both a virtual option and then a blended learning option. That blended learning option is not available statewide, but it's available definitely in the urban areas where a child can be assigned, and they'll go to more of a traditional school day. Typically, students you'll have a math class. But if you prefer sitting in your English class and doing your math work, that's great, and you can then physically walk over to the math class if you need it. So it's kind of that they're trying to sort of marry the best of both worlds. You get the flexibility of a virtual school, but the convenience of not having them in your house and having teachers physically available with the students. So those are the virtual schools. That's the majority of students that are enrolled in charter schools in the state are in virtual schools today.
Really? That's interesting. Okay.
Oh, I didn't look up the numbers specifically, but yeah, definitely well over half, probably close to 60 to 70% of the students in charter schools are enrolled in virtual schools. So yeah.
Are the virtual schools, it seems to me that a lot of the charter schools kind of specialize in a particular type of education. You mentioned Dove Science Academy and a couple of others that I know Class and School of Advanced Studies, they kind of target a certain type of learning or preparation for certain career paths or certain areas of study in college and whatnot. Is
Yep.
that fairly common in the charter school, or is that, are those the minority of charter schools and the rest more kind of broad, like
No.
I guess a public school would be, traditional public school would
Yeah.
be.
It's in the virtual world, they're more generally focused rather than the specialization. We did mention Dove, I mentioned Insight, where they've got a particular focus, but for the most part, it's more of a sort of a general focus, similar to a traditional district. Within the brick and mortar space, we have some charter schools that that focus on what, like Harding Fine Arts, as the name indicates, a fine arts school. Harding Independence Charter Prep is a college preparatory focus with a particular focus on AP. And so, yeah, I think in the charter world, one of the concepts of a charter school is that they try to offer an alternative choice to families. One misnomer I want to make sure we address is that who can enroll in a charter school. And I remember I'm a parent of a child with special needs, so this is a particularly important piece to me. Any child in Oklahoma can apply and cannot be turned down for any of their for any special needs.
Okay.
So
Okay.
now, I've said this, like if I wanted to enroll my daughter at Harding Independence Charter Prep, that would be an option. Now, we don't live within OKCPS, which is where they operate, so we wouldn't be preferenced for that. But if they had a seat available, my daughter with Down syndrome could go there.
Okay.
I think the world of my daughter. I don't know her limitations. I don't even want to know. I believe in holding high expectations and pushing her hard, but I don't think that she's going to be a traditional college student, and that's okay. So Harding Charter Prep is probably not the best fit for her.
Sure.
But if I disagreed with that, we have that option to pursue that. And I think there's a common perception that charter schools, well, they just they don't take those students or whatever. Well, I'm here to tell you that they have to. If you feel like you've been discriminated against, you should reach out, because reach out to the State Department. You can reach out to the Resource Center. Well, we work with traditional districts and charter schools. We also believe in upholding the laws and making sure that all kids are given a fair. So that is a common
law that they're required to accept those students.
Every child. Yep. Yeah. And they can't say, well, now they can say, look, we don't have a particular focus in special education. So it's going to be a unique case. And, I'm not interested in pursuing an option that doesn't fit my child well.
Sure.
But the flip side is, if I think that it fits my child well, then then it's my choice as a parent, not at the school level. That's a key characteristic of all public schools, including charter schools.
So even with charter schools, the real limitation is capacity. Would that be correct? What
Yep.
How many they can actually facilitate educating?
Yeah. Yeah. And for folks in the traditional district, I'll sometimes hear complaints, well, we got to take every kid. And I'm like, well, yes, if you reside within a district, you're going to that school. The limitation that the charter schools often face is just a facility constraint. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the ability to bond. And so they are often very limited on facilities. And so that's just where they are. I know most of the charter school leaders who are constrained are very frustrated by that, because they want it. They're looking for additional facility solutions, but that is often why they're unable to accommodate, and why many of especially our high performing charter schools have voluminous waiting lists, because there's just more demand than they can physically accept. So,
sure. Yeah. So if I'm looking at a charter school, whether it's a virtual school or a physical charter school that I'm going to, what's the process if I decide I've found one, this one's going to really meet my child's needs, and we're happy with it, we think it's going to work for our family, what's the process to making that transition?
Yep. So it is a formal transfer process.
Okay.
So when a student is enrolled in a charter school, they will transfer from their district of residence to the charter school. So there's a form that gets filled out. Each charter school will have its own application process, and the application cannot be, again, there's no test requirements. There's no, even though, Harding Charter Prep is or Harding Fine Arts is a fine arts school. There is no application to get in. Like, you don't have to be a top-notch dancer or artist or singer or whatever to go to Harding Fine Arts. So the application is simply, here's my name, here's the information on my child, and then if the child is accepted in, a lot of times it's through a lottery process, because when the school has more students than they can serve, they are required by law to have a lottery.
Okay.
And the only preferences that are typically allowed are kids that live within the district where the charter school is located get preference over kids that are out of district.
Okay.
So if there are more kids in district than the charter school can serve, then only kids that live in the district will get it. And then the other preference is if your sibling is in the school, you'll get preference over others.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, and I'm sorry, these are the same things with like open transfer laws. Employees of children of an employee can also be given preference if the school chooses. So
there's no on the other side, the school that's leaving, they don't have an ability to prevent that transfer if they would rather that student stay there.
Correct. Yeah, none whatsoever. So this is and that gets at that gets at sort of that inter-district choice that we kind of mentioned here. So let me speak to that. 2 years ago, the legislature passed a law that changed open transfer. We had an open transfer process, and it was a little more narrowly defined. And so I put in the link. It's a pretty complicated process, and so I put it here in the chat, and I believe we'll make available when this is made public. But now all districts are required to allow. Used to be, well, there was an opportunity for families to move. There was sort of the unless it occurred during the open transfer period, the sending district, the district where the kid resides, had the ability to say, no, we're going to block that. Now, they couldn't always do that. There was an open transfer period, but the receiving district always had that option to say, well, no, we're not going to accept that transfer.
Okay.
Don't know exactly how often that happened, but regardless, those abilities have been, if not completely eliminated, severely constrained. And so now, year-round, families that want to transfer have the ability to apply for a transfer to any of the public schools of their choice. I don't think anybody in Oklahoma City is trying to move to the Panhandle. It's just too long of a. But you do have that option. And the districts are required to. Or all public schools are required to post what their capacity is, and they update that quarterly. And so some districts have now taken that opportunity to say, hey, we need more third graders. And for whatever reason, our third grade class is low. I've seen some Facebook ads trying to, to say, hey, well, our second and fourth grade are full, our third grade is open, and we are actively recruiting families to come in. And I think that's a positive development for families when that happens. Some districts or some schools will not have capacity, so they are able to say, okay, yeah, while we accept open transfers, we also have a limitation in our school is physically at capacity. So there are a number of schools that are in that boat. But again, those numbers have to be updated every quarter, and so families have that option. And there's really year-round has that option, that ability to transfer.
Is there when we talk about capacity? So let's say a school could seat 1,000 students. Okay. At capacity, is capacity we're at 1,000, or could capacity be we're at 950 or 900, and they have that range? And who decides that? Is state law define that, or does the school district, or how is that capacity decided?
Yeah, there's some gray area there. Districts get to set the capacity, and there isn't sort of a requirement of, fire code says it's 1,000, so you're going to take 1,000, right? Okay. So the school can say, this is what we believe is the appropriate number within this school. Right. What they can't do is, hey, we're going to limit it 900, but then when a kid applies, maybe a particularly good athlete applies, oh, we'll take 901, right? They don't have that flexibility.
And obviously that number is going to depend upon available teachers. It's going to depend upon available classrooms,
The
and
size of the
size
classroom.
of the classroom. Yeah, those types of things. Yeah.
Yeah, so the schools get to that. And then just because there's space available, there are a few pieces that the districts can reject on. If a student has chronic absenteeism, which I believe is defined as more than 10 unexcused absences in a year, that is a reason that a district can say, yeah, we're not going to accept that child. Or if they have a particularly lengthy disciplinary process.
Okay.
Or disciplinary sort of history. So now, if a family is rejected through that, so for absentee, for behavior, or whatever, there is an appeals process. The family can appeal first to the local school board and then ultimately up to the state board if they believe that they've been wrongly discriminated on. So,
Okay.
but yeah, so it's a pretty important option that I think this past year, I think 11,000 students, if I'm remembering correctly, took advantage of that option. And that's a pretty big option. And I feel as people become aware of that and as districts come to realize that, look, this is a great way to serve families. I think that we'll see more of that. And I actually think that's a good thing. Some people get concerned about that. I think it's kind of strange that we've built schools that are sort of designed to serve everyone, right? And I think one of your questions was about, tell me about charter schools and if they have a particular focus. I think that's a positive trend that especially in the later years as kids start to distinguish these are the things that I'm interested in.
Right.
That schools that say we're going to have a particular focus on arts or on STEM or on others. Not that all schools have to have that option. I think your general ed schools served me well. I went to a traditional public school. So that's great. But I think having some of those additional options, I find is a positive trend.
Sure.
And districts like Oklahoma City Public Schools here has, you mentioned Class and SAS is a school of arts and science. Some of the district options there, those can become application schools where they have requirements, and I think those have their role to play as well for those that are really seeking out maybe a particular specific arts focus and things like that.
I know the state compiles a lot of data from public schools as far as graduation rates and student performance on standardized tests and things like this. Does charters, all of these other public options, whether charter or virtual, their data goes into that as well? Is that correct? So
correct.
If I'm a parent and I'm concerned, I want to know, hey, if I put them into this charter school, how is it performing compared to others? Can I go to the state website and find that out, or is there some other place I would need to go? How do I check and compare, if you will?
Yeah, so we have a state accountability system. It's kind of referred to as the ADF report card for schools. Charter schools, just like traditional public schools, every single one of the school sites receives an annual report. And we know that with COVID, those were suspended. And we're still waiting for the results from last school year.
Okay.
But I believe in fairly short order, those will be replaced. Those will be sent out, and yes, you can go pull all of that. Just like a traditional district, you can go and look at the virtual. At any charter school will have the same financial transparency. So if you're interested in sort of comparing, school financials as well. I don't know how many parents do that, but that is an option as well. So I would. I'll say this, like as a parent, the A through F report card has some utility, but not a lot. One, especially when it's coming out at this time of year, it's a little difficult to use. If it was more timely, that would be helpful. But I don't know. I mean, I want to know that my child is going to a school that has good academics. I also want to know, arts are very important to me. I'm the son of a choir director. I believe in a well-rounded child.
Sure.
So I want to know the arts programs. That's not typically reflected in the accountability report. I know that the State Department developed schools of oh gosh, Levi Patrick, if you're listening, you're gonna be mad at me because this was your idea. But schools of distinction, I believe it is, or
Okay.
academies of distinction, where schools can sort of self-qualify and say, this is our focus in arts or in STEM or in any number of areas, and so then ideally schools will continue to distinguish themselves, and that's another factor that parents can take into account when trying to make that decision.
Yeah. Does it seem to you, and I can see how this now, I'm a school principal or I'm a school administrator, and I have a family that says, hey, we want to transfer out. And that's almost like, well, you're not, you can see how someone would take that as being, you're saying something negative about us, which that may not be what they're saying at all. Is there some, is there competition, or is there hesitancy, or does this ability of parents to transfer in and out create animosity amongst school districts? Have they kind of found a way to say, look, we realize that not every school is going to fit every family's needs, and we get that. I have no feel for the impact on how school districts really view this type of ability of families to move in between them, if you will, relatively easily.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some school districts that really hate it. The school administrators that I work with, by and large, recognize, hey, if a family wants to move, then I may not like it, but I also need to recognize that it's their choice. And if they're making that choice, then we probably need to take a look at what we're doing. Right. Just like if you were, typically going to one grocery store and then decided to switch, if enough customers made that choice, that grocery store is going to figure out why and something to address that, or aren't going to be around.
Right.
And so I think that, the appropriate response from a school is to say, well, can we understand why these decisions are being made, and what can we do to address it? The fact of the matter is that schools are funded, at least partially, on the number of students that they serve. And when a student walks out, revenue walks out, and oftentimes schools point out, well, we have fixed costs with variable revenue, which is is partially true. And so, my response is, well, then, okay, what can you do to attract new students and or to attract those other students?
Sure.
And, I think trying to understand what what is driving the family decision, right? Like, typically when you're choosing to leave your district of residence to another district or to a charter school, there's a higher burden for the parents, right? Like if we were to choose to enroll our girls in a charter school, we'd have to handle all of the transportation, whereas our girls ride the bus. For me to have to take on that additional logistical challenge, there's going to have to be a reason driving me for that. And so, sure, I won't tell you that all districts they're not celebrating, understandably, when a family transfers. I'm sure every once in a while there's a family that transfers and there's a little celebration. But I think by and large they understand that those decisions are made. Sometimes it's just going to happen. That's the right decision, and a lot of times it's a decision that can then prompt necessary changes at the school level.
Okay. What would you say are maybe the top 2 or 3 reasons that parents might look at transferring out? You kind of mentioned one. It might be a situation with a special needs child that needs additional services than what their school could provide. I don't know if that's one of the top reasons, but I know it's one that gets discussed quite a bit.
Yeah, I mentioned the statewide virtual charter board. That's the sponsor of all the virtual charter schools in the state. And it's a little dated now, it's 3 or 4 years ago, but they did a survey of parents and asked, why did you make that choice? The overwhelming number one choice was that they felt that their kids were being bullied in the school that they were transferring away from.
Okay. So that's pretty impressive that that's the number one thing kind of driving decisions.
Yep. Yeah, I don't remember the number, so I won't say a number, but I remember being shocked that it was as high as it was. And I think look, it's a fact of our society that a lot of students and frankly a lot of parents are acting bullying fashions. And it's something I worry about, as a parent of two kids in public school, especially my daughter with special needs. That would break my heart. I will say, I think my daughter has been treated wonderfully. When we go to the local grocery store, the number of kids that come up and say hi to my daughter is fantastic. During trick-or-treating growing up, it's almost embarrassing. We'll get a line of, because everyone knows Maddie and they want to talk to her. And how about you? But I didn't do that when I was trick-or-treating. I didn't care who was there. I wanted to get to the next house. So we feel particularly blessed, but that would break my heart, and I would, as a parent, would do everything I could to make sure that my child felt safe.
Sure.
There's that, and then there's other factors of course flexibility. Like that's why parents were choosing virtual, like they wanted their kids. My younger daughter is enrolled in, or is involved in, a lot of theater, and a number of the kids that are they're sort of almost a professional track at the theater that we're involved with. And a number of those kids are in virtual charter schools because of the flexibility it affords, and so that they can really focus on on being focused on theater as much as possible. I've met families that are in gymnastics or in other specialized sports that require travel, and so things like that will lead families to seek that out. But yeah, I think it's my understanding is the biggest decision is my kid doesn't feel safe, doesn't is being bullied. They're seeking that out. I think within other, like in smaller districts, there are times where a neighboring district will have a particularly strong teacher or program, like in science or in math, that's a particular interest for a child. And so, families are seeking out that fit for their child's interest. And, I think that that's understandable and probably very healthy choices that are made.
Now, you had mentioned something earlier, and I want to come back to it. You just barely kind of referenced it, which was career tech program.
Yeah.
I wanted to come back around that and let you speak to that at this point.
Yeah, I think a lot of Oklahomans get this, but I don't know about you, but when I grew up in Michigan. Vo-tech had a very negative connotation in my mind, right? Which was, so I didn't know the term career tech. I knew vo-tech, right? And those were the kids that they're not the good students, right? They're the, and it's like, and I look back on that and I think, wow, what a, wasted opportunity. So I went to college. I was a nerd. I was a good student. But I put myself through college running a landscape company. I came from a family that worked. We worked at it, and I'm very proud of the skilled trades that I learned. I grew up in a kind of a construction family, and then took that. And I think about, if you're not familiar with the career tech system, I really encourage people to go take a look at it. It's a system that is funded almost entirely by property taxes. And then with adult learners, a lot of adults can go and get certificates, and they will charge for those certificates. Not every district, but most districts in the state have an affiliation with a career tech, and that allows their children to take courses there when they're age appropriate. So generally in high school. And the course offerings in career tech are astounding and awesome. I have not walked into a career tech where I haven't walked out with my head spinning with ideas on just all of the amazing things that are going on. And that's your traditional vo-tech. So your automotive, your there's like beauty salon things, and places that offer great jobs, welding, things like that. But also now, some of our most advanced coursework, AP Calculus, AP Chemistry, is offered at many of our career techs. Robotics. Some of our greatest robotics programs of the state are affiliations between districts and career tech. And I mean, you want to see some awesome learning. Like I've been at the Gordon Cooper Career Tech in Shawnee, where I watched a kid coding in Java. It was like a sophomore in high school, coding in Java, making a robot in the other room move, sitting there. And I said, I spent a little time in IT. I'm like, how'd you learn Java? And he said, YouTube, man.
Yes, my children have helped me learn that you can pretty much learn anything you want through YouTube.
Absolutely. Yeah, we probably should talk about that as another option for families. And so, I mean, it's an option that a lot of people don't think of,
Mhm.
either because they're just not aware of it, or because they have that negative connotation that, oh, the VOTEC, that's where the bad kids go, or that's where the kids that aren't going to go to college go. And I'm here to tell you that is a wasted opportunity. We have, and it's one of the bright spots. We can often point out all of the weak points and where Oklahoma ranks low in education. Our career tech is lauded nationally as one of the exemplars, and is really something I think that we should be proud of and leverage.
The advantage of that as an option is you finish a program of study and work through there, and it's designed to you transition right into the workforce. You're ready to go and start doing this and getting a
Absolutely.
decent income off of what you've learned, right?
Yeah, when I first moved to Oklahoma 9 years ago, one of the first meetings I had was with Dr. Summers, was the head of career tech at the time. I don't remember the specific numbers, but he said he was somewhere close to 50% of the certificates that they were giving out were going to individuals that had earned a bachelor's or an associate's degree already, and they were coming back for a certificate because they weren't finding work in their field. And
Wow.
so he joked that we should have a T-shirt that says "Career Tech, the graduate school for OU's higher ed." I hope I don't get Bob in trouble for saying that,
You might
but
get in a little trouble for that.
yeah, well, I apologize, Bob, but I think look, like I'm a liberal arts major.
Uh,
You mentioned I have a political theory and constitutional democracy,
yeah.
because it's such a great field for work, right? I loved my collegiate experience, and I still rely on that for the critical thinking skills that I developed. But you know, we shouldn't be ashamed of people. Work is work, right? And the plumber that comes and helps out at my house, I love just as much as lots of other people in society. And you can
Sometimes
learn
more.
really, you say?
I said sometimes more.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think we do a disservice when we overemphasize college and sort of our good careers, and we turn our nose up at jobs that are very necessary for society and very important, and also actually pay pretty well too. And so, I think that, I guess if we're going to talk about career tech, we probably should talk about where you're sitting as well, because our community colleges fall into that same boat, and the options. We mentioned course choice. Another course choice that a lot of districts offer is the ability to be dual enrolled at an associate's at a community college during credit as well. And to me, those are opportunities for kids to build skills that are highly employable, highly important, and can lead to financial long-term success for the family as well.
You mentioned those certificates, and that's one thing I've learned is that in a lot of fields, that certification is as, if not more important than the degree. It shows something very specific to an employer about their capability, and then the body of knowledge that they've learned, or what they've been able to do, that maybe just the degree by itself doesn't demonstrate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we're moving, as we move into, more of an automated world, more of a, if you've had any time to play around a chat GPT, but in that whole world of sort of smart robotics and things like that, where much more specialized skills are going to be necessary and sort of valued in the society, that I think that our career tech and community colleges are positioned to really be a great option. And there's something that families, as they're, thinking about their high school students, should be considering.
I very much agree with that. And I will tell you, Chat GPT is blowing up my world right now.
I just finally took the dive this week, and I went in. We have an event next week that the Resource Center is participating in. It's National School Choice Week next week, and there's a governor and some legislators will be down at a charter school. And so someone said, just go in and play it around. And so I went in and I said, make me a haiku of Oklahoma charter schools and National School Choice Week. And it did. And I said, make me another one. And it kept on giving them to me all different. I was blown away.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of people in my world concerned about, is Chat GPT going to be doing a lot of people's homework for them, now. And so
I think there's going to be a lot more. Here's my report. And then, okay, great. Give me a presentation on it.
there you go. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that goes to show things change all the time, and technology and things evolve, and what the skills that people needed in 1900 weren't the same skills they needed in 1950, which weren't the same in 2000, and now we're in the 2020s, and they're going to continue to change.
Yep.
And the ability of people and families to find the educational environment that is going to help their child develop whatever skills that they're naturally inclined to, that they're interested in, becomes more and more important. And these options that you've talked about are critical in allowing families to do that, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
As we wrap up, is there any kind of parting words that you would give folks as they're considering their options? And the good thing I think about Oklahoma is that you do have a lot of options, and even within the public school environment, as you've discussed, you have a lot of options. And so, anything you'd like to kind of leave families thinking about as they're considering that range of options?
Yeah, I think you're right. We do have a lot of options. I would say that the options are lean towards the urban areas, right?
Mhm.
We know that there are options statewide with virtual charter schools.
Sure.
You've always got that option. Now, that may not be a realistic option if families don't have the space or capacity, but there is that option. I would just say that we're hardwired as humans to oppose change. It just feels uncomfortable, right? And I talk about in my world, my line of work, I talk a lot about change. My wife does point out that I personally hate it, right? So it is odd that I'm probably a supporter of change or a change agent, while being a curmudgeon in my personal life. And so I say that just to acknowledge that it's okay,
Mhm.
like that doing things differently, seeking out schooling that is different. I would say, I've worked in a number of different industries, and I think change is particularly difficult in education
Mhm.
because by and large, we went to the same types of schools. Even though I grew up in Michigan, I'm going to take a guess that you and I probably were taught algebra in the same type of classroom in the
I
same
bet
way.
we were, yeah.
And that shared experience is somewhat of our sort of the fabric that holds us together as a society. But it also makes change more difficult
Mhm.
because, well, that's not how math is taught, right? I know that because you and I took the same math, right? And as we encounter an increasingly changing world, being more comfortable with that change within education, I think, is critical to our success as a country and a society. And so, embracing that, being open to it, and also being open to the difficult conversations. I use that phrase precisely. I think it's very important that if a family is displeased with a teacher or with a principal, that they go and they have that difficult conversation. That doesn't mean that they have to be impolite, doesn't mean that they have to be angry, but they can say, this is the experience that I see my child having, and
Right.
these are the concerns that I have. And the educators that I know, that I work with, and we work with over 240 districts statewide. By and large, those administrators are open to those conversations, especially when approached respectfully, and will work really hard. I don't know many people that went into education to get rich. They did. They're not real smart because you've got a lot better fields to do. They went, by and large, to go into education because they wanted to serve families and help out kids. And when approached with those difficult conversations, my experience is that by and large, productive solutions can be identified.
Sure. Very good. If a parent would like to know more about their various public school options, where should they go to find that out? What would be a good starting place, if you would?
Sure. People are always welcome to reach out to me directly
Okay.
at the Resource Center. So our website's opsrc.net. My email is Brent, BRENT, Bushey, BUSHEY, at opsrc.net. Our State Department of Education has lots of resources available there. And so SDE, oh gosh, what is it?
Okay.
Computer.
Is it
The
okay?
Oklahoma State
Yeah.
Department of Education and Google will get you there.
Mhm.
I think that
We'll put it up. We'll put it up. Our wonderful tech and video editing folks will put all this up for them. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can, if I don't know the answer, I'm pretty good at delegating it out. So, I always welcome folks reaching out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and giving us a lot of your insight and knowledge about the public school options that are available to our families. I think this is going to be very helpful to a lot of people. It was helpful to me because I didn't know everything about the availability of various these options. So thank you again for your time and your information that you provided to us.
Thank you.
All right.